It was in the year 1793 that George Washington began his second and last term as U.S. President. During his first term in office, Washington had focused on getting the new federal government up and running. But as the dawn of the 19th century drew nearer, political problems at home and war in Europe increasingly challenged the United States government. At the same time, an industrial revolution was occurring, and it was bringing about big changes in the way that goods were manufactured. This revolution set off a chain of events that would come to have an enormous impact on the U.S. economy. And it would also cause great differences to develop between the way people lived in the increasingly industrial northern states and the mostly agricultural southern states. In 1793, at the time George Washington took the oath of office for president a second time, the Rhode Island factory seen here was already into its third year of operation. It was the first factory in America to use water-powered machines to spin cotton thread for weaving. Yet even though the demand for cotton cloth was great back then, cotton had not been very widely used in textiles. That was because cotton fibers are contained in the plant's seed pods, and before the fiber can be spun into thread, the seeds must be removed. Cleaning cotton is a very slow process when done by hand. But after 1793, the year Eli Whitney of Connecticut invented a machine called the cotton gin. Simply by turning a crank, it was possible to remove as many seeds from raw cotton in a single day as 50 people could do using just their hands. Because the cotton gin greatly increased the amount of raw material available to make textiles, cloth production increased in New England. More textile factories were built in the northern states, and rural people started to move to industrial cities to find steady work. Cotton rapidly became the most important product of the southern states, and the number of slaves working on cotton plantations increased enormously. And that was how a simple invention for removing seeds from raw cotton came to have a tremendous effect on the lives of millions of people. The same year the cotton gin was invented, the nation of France was fighting a major war in Europe. France had asked for U.S. military support, but George Washington decided America should remain neutral. In other words, he did not want his nation to take sides in the conflict. Washington made this decision in spite of the fact that America had signed a defense treaty with the royal government of France in order to secure their crucial help during the Revolutionary War. However, by 1793, France's monarchy had been overthrown and a new government was in place. Besides that, France's main enemy, Great Britain, had become America's biggest trading partner, and the United States could not afford to lose British business. In the end, the U.S. policy of neutrality caused big problems and angered both the French and the British. As a result, Britain and France captured American ships, and U.S. sailors were often forced to work as crew members on British vessels. In 1794, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Jay was sent to London on a diplomatic mission. Its main goals were to bring an end to British interference with American trade ships, and to clear up a variety of problems, some dating back to the end of the Revolutionary War. Under the treaty that Jay finally negotiated, Britain agreed to turn over forts being used to supply arms to American Indians who were trying to put a stop to U.S. settlement on their lands. These British forts were located in the western Lake Erie region near present-day Detroit and Toledo. Also under Jay's treaty, the United States agreed to stop carrying goods between France and her colonies. In exchange, the U.S. got a few minor concessions from Britain to limit its interference with American trade ships. However, as far as France was concerned, Jay's treaty merely showed that America was far from neutral because of its willingness to give in to British demands. And as a result, an undeclared war broke out between the U.S. and France. As the United States government worked at solving its problems with France and Britain, trouble developed at home in the normally peaceful farm country of western Pennsylvania and Kentucky. People in these areas raised wheat, corn, and rye, and they used some of the grain to make whiskey. It was perfectly legal to make whiskey, but U.S. law said that persons who did so had to pay a tax. In fact, tax on alcohol was an important source of income for the federal government back in the 1790s. But many farmers refused to pay the tax. They even committed violence against the federal tax collectors, setting off what has come to be called the Whiskey Rebellion. To put an end to the rebellion, President Washington sent 15,000 U.S. troops into the region. This large show of force soon convinced the farmers to pay the taxes. And the rebels also were required to sign the document seen here, in which they agreed to respect the laws of the United States. And so, by taking swift military action against the Whiskey Rebellion, the American government made it clear that it would not tolerate activities that violated national laws. 1 year after the Whiskey Rebellion, negotiations on some important issues were underway here in the Kingdom of Spain between royal officials and the representatives of the United States. Under the agreement that was finally worked out, called the Treaty of San Lorenzo, the Spaniards gave up trying to rule an area of disputed land that had been claimed by both the U.S. and Spain. And as a result, thousands of square miles of new territory were added to the United States. This land later became parts of the states of Mississippi and Alabama. In addition, the treaty prevented Spanish military forces from interfering with American trading ships on the Mississippi River. Even beyond that, the Treaty of San Lorenzo allowed American products and products destined for the American West to be loaded and unloaded here in New Orleans, which was then under Spanish control, without being taxed. Having free access to the Mississippi River proved to be extremely important to America, because it increased both trade and settlement in the western region of the country. A basic change took place in the way goods were manufactured. Before 1798, mechanical devices from guns to clocks to locks were made by blacksmiths, one at a time by hand. As a result, every mechanical device was unique. But in 1798, the inventor of the cotton gin, Eli Whitney, developed a new manufacturing method based on making nearly identical devices, built with interchangeable parts. Whitney came up with his new method while filling a rush order for 10,000 guns called muskets for the U.S. military. The new muskets had a big advantage over older models because they could be easily repaired. Not only that, the new guns could be manufactured a lot faster than the old handmade models, and that was a big bonus during times of war. The concept of interchangeable parts led to the mass production of a wide range of mechanical devices. And as a result, American industry was soon revolutionized. During the final year of the 18th century, George Washington, the man who had come to be called the father of his country, died at the age of 67 from a throat infection, an illness that could have easily been cured using modern medicines. That same year, a man called Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in France. This change in leadership made it possible for John Adams to finally work out a peace deal with the French just as his term of office was ending. Only 4 years later, a new American president, Thomas Jefferson, helped work out another deal with Napoleon that pushed the boundaries of the new nation far to the west of the Mississippi River and doubled the size of the United States.